Hi there, I'm George Duss, and this is the Spirit of Dating podcast. We've been building something over the past few episodes. First, we talked about self-love, remembering your sacred worth before you look for it in someone else's eyes. Then we explored emotional safety, that calm state your nervous system needs for real connection to become real. These two things, knowing your worth and feeling safe, they're the foundation. But here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes you think you found that connection. You think you found someone who sees you, who gets you. You're having these deep conversations, sharing things you never would tell anyone. Staying up late, texting about life and dreams, and all the ways you see the world. And it feels profound. It feels like finally someone gets you. But here's what's actually happening. You're not falling in love for the person. You're falling in love for the conversations, for the possibility, for the version of them you've created in your mind, based on text and late night calls, and a handful of interactions. You know that feeling when you match with someone on a dating app and suddenly they're everywhere. You're checking your phone constantly, analyzing every message, replaying conversations in your head. You can't focus at work. You're not really present with your friends. Your whole world has narrowed down to one question. Do they feel this too? And here's the thing. It feels like love. It feels like chemistry. It feels like finally you found someone who gets you. But if you pause for a second and actually check in with yourself, you're not calm, you're not at peace, you're obsessing. Every notification makes your heart race. Every hour without a text sends you spiraling. You're running on adrenaline and hope. And underneath it all, this quiet terror that if you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, be the wrong thing, it all disappears. That's not love. That's not even attraction. That's limerence. Now, most people have never heard that word, but I guarantee you felt it. Limerence is that obsessive, all-consuming infatuation that hijacks your entire nervous system. It's when you're not falling in love with a person, you're falling in love with the possibility of them, with the fantasy of what could be. In your brain lights up like a slot machine. Every text is a win. Every silence is a loss. And you keep pulling that lever, hoping this time will be different. Psychologist Dorothy Tenoff, she's the one who first named this, spent years studying it. And what she found was that limerence isn't about the other person at all. It's about uncertainty. It's about longing. It's about that gap between what you have and what you desperately want. The person doesn't even have to be right for you. In fact, they usually aren't. Because limerence thrives on distance, on ambiguity, on almost. And the moment it becomes real, the moment they're actually available, actually consistent, actually showing up, the feeling starts to fade. Because it's never about them. It's about what your heart was trying to resolve. Today, we're talking about the difference between attraction and attachment, between desire and desperation, between falling in love and falling into an old wound. Because here's the truth. When you're in limerence, you're not seeing the person in front of you. You're seeing a mirror. And what's reflecting back is everything you've been hungry for your whole life. So let's talk about it. Let's name it. Let's shine a light on what's really happening when chemistry feels like chaos. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Olivia. And honestly, as I tell you her story, you're going to hear echoes of my own, because I've done this too, more than once. Olivia matched with someone on Hinge. Let's call him Ethan. His profile was good. Thoughtful prompts, real photos, nothing that screamed red flag. They started messaging on the app, and right away, the conversation just clicked. Not small talk, real talk. They talked about books, about travel, about what they were looking for in a relationship. He asked good questions. She felt seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. After a few days of app messaging, he said, "I'm not really on here much. Want to switch to texting?" She gave him her number. And that's when it shifted. The text became longer, more vulnerable. They'll text all day, good morning messages, random thoughts, photos of their coffee, their view, their day. Then one night around 10 p.m., he called. They talked for 2 hours about their family, about past relationships, about fears and dreams, and all those things you don't usually share with someone you've never actually met. She told me, I felt like I've known him forever, like we just get each other. They made plans to meet, coffee on a Saturday afternoon. But before the Saturday even came, she was already halfway in love with him. She replayed the conversations in her head, imagined what their first kiss would be like, pictured him meeting her friends. She checked his social media, noticed when he was online, analyzed the timing of his texts. In her mind, she already written the story. He was the one. This was different. This was real. And Saturday came. They met at a cafe downtown. And within the first 5 minutes, something was off. Not bad exactly, just different. His energy in person wasn't quite what it had been over text. He seemed more guarded, less open. The conversation was fine, pleasant even, but it didn't have that spark she felt on the phone. She kept waiting for it to click the way it had been in their text, but it didn't. They hugged goodbye. He said, "This was nice. Let's do it again." She went home and immediately texted him. "I had such a great time. Thank you for today." He responded a few hours later. "Yeah, it was good to finally meet. Not, I had a good time too. Not, when can I see you again? Just, yeah, it was good." And that's when the spiral began. She replayed the entire date in her head. What did she say wrong? Did she seem too eager? Not interesting enough? Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe it takes him time to warm up in person. She convinced herself it was just first date jitters, that the real conversation they built over text was still there, underneath. They texted on and off for another week, but his responses got slower, less detailed. She sent a thoughtful message. He'd respond with a sentence or two, sometimes just an emoji. She'd bring up another date. He said, "Yeah, maybe next week. I'm pretty swamped right now." But she could see him active on Instagram, posting stories, clearly not too swamped to be online. And still, she held on. Because in her mind, they had something real. Those late night conversations, the vulnerability they shared. That meant something, right? When she finally called me for a reading, 3 weeks had passed since their date. They were still texting occasionally, but it was surface level now, nothing like before. "I don't understand," she said. "We had such a deep connection. How does that just disappear?" I pulled a card. Knight of Cups, but reversed. Let me tell you what I saw and what I told Olivia. The Knight of Cups is the romantic, the one who's caught up in feelings, impossibility, in the idea of love. Upright, he's sincere, he follows through, he turns words into action. Reversed, he's lost in fantasy. He confuses emotional intensity with actual connection. And here's what's important. This isn't just about Ethan. Olivia had done the same thing. She'd fallen in love with the conversations, with the intimacy of late night texts and vulnerable phone calls, but she hadn't fallen in love with him because she didn't actually know him. She knew the version of him that existed in text form, the careful, curtailed responses, the thoughtful questions, the persona he could control through a screen. But in person, that's when reality sets in. That's when you see how someone moves through the world, how they treat the barista, how they hold silence, how their energy actually feels when you're in the same room. And the person she met that Saturday, he wasn't a bad guy. He just wasn't the person she created in her mind. This is modern limerence, and it's everywhere. You match on an app, you text for days, maybe even weeks. You have those deep, vulnerable conversations that make you feel so connected. Your brain does what brains do. It fills in the gaps. All the things you don't know about them, your mind creates a story. It projects. It imagines. And because you're sharing real emotions through text, because you're being vulnerable, your nervous system starts bonding. Oxytocin, dopamine, all those attachment chemicals, they flood your system. But here's the thing. You're not bonding with the person. You're bonding with a conversation. And I know this because I've been on both sides. I've been Olivia, building someone up in my head based on amazing texts and calls, then meeting them and feeling that disconnect. I remember this woman I matched a few years ago. We texted for 2 weeks before a meeting. Deep conversations, vulnerable stuff. She opened up about her family, her past relationship, her dreams. And I filled in all the gaps. I imagined what our life would look like, how she'd fit in my world, what our first trip together would be. We finally met. And within 10 minutes, I knew the energy wasn't there. She was lovely, kind, interesting, exactly what she's been over text. But something about being in the same physical space, it just didn't click. And I couldn't accept it because in my head, we're already building something. So I kept trying. I proposed a second date, text her the next day, tried to recreate that text intimacy in person. But you can't force chemistry. And I was chasing a feeling I've already had in my head, not the reality of who we were together in person. That's being Olivia. That's the side where you're the one holding on, trying to make the fantasy real. But I've also been Ethan. I've been the guy on the other side, having those deep conversations over text, feeling that connection, then meeting someone and realizing I'm not actually attracted to them. Not because they did anything wrong, not because they weren't who they said they were, just because what worked over text didn't translate in person. Then I became the one pulling back, responding slower, being less available. Not out of cruelty, out of confusion. Because I felt something through the screen, but in person, that feeling wasn't there. I didn't know how to say that without hurting them. So I did what a lot of people do. I faded. I got busy. I sent shorter messages. I hope they got the hint without me having to say the hard thing out loud. And looking back, I know that caused more pain than just being honest would have. But in the moment, I was caught between guilt because I'd shared all this vulnerable stuff with them. And the truth, which was I wasn't feeling it in person. So yeah, I've been both. The one who fell harder and couldn't let go of the fantasy. The one who realized it wasn't working and didn't know how to say it. That's why this pattern is so painful. Because both people are experiencing something real, just not the same thing. One person's falling deeper, the other realizing it doesn't translate. And neither one is wrong. It's just the difference between text intimacy and embodied intimacy. Between falling for the conversation and falling for the person. It's not that anyone's lying. It's not the emotions aren't real. It's that text intimacy and embodied intimacy are two completely different things. You can share your entire life story over text. You can be vulnerable, open, real. But until you actually sit across from someone, breathing the same air, feeling their energy, you don't actually know them. And you don't know if what you feel is attraction or just attachment to the emotional depth of the conversation. Olivia told me what finally helped her let go. She realized she's been grieving someone who never actually existed. Not the Ethan as he really was, but the version of him she created through text and late night calls, and the narratives in her head between messages. She said, I was in love with the context we shared, the vulnerability, the feeling of being understood. But I wasn't in love with him because I never actually knew him. And that's the distinction that changes everything. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop falling for the conversation and start noticing who someone actually is when you're in the same room. Let's talk about what Spirit was really showing Olivia through the Knight of Cups reversed. Because here's the thing about tarot. It's not predicting your future. It's reflecting your present. And what it was reflecting back to Olivia was this. You're in love with a ghost. The Knight of Cups reversed is the archetype of emotional unavailability dressed up as romance. He talks about feelings but doesn't embody them. He makes grand declarations but doesn't follow through. He keeps you in the space of almost because that's where he feels comfortable. Not because he's evil, not because he doesn't care, but because he's terrified of what happens when fantasy becomes reality. Now, upright, the Knight of Cups is beautiful energy. He's the one who shows up with flowers, who writes you love letters, who's emotionally open and isn't afraid to be romantic. He's sincere, he's available, he follows his heart, and he backs it up with action. That's healthy attraction. That's the romantic energy that you can actually build something real. But reverse, he's performing romance to avoid intimacy. Here's where Dorothy Tenoff's work becomes really important. Tenoff identified the core features of limerence. They're all about uncertainty, intrusive thinking. You can't stop thinking about the person, even when you're trying to focus on other things. Fear of rejection. Every interaction feels high stakes because you're terrified they'll pull away. Physical symptoms, heart pounding, trembling, loss of appetite, insomnia. And most importantly, dependency on them feeling the same way, meaning your entire emotional state hinges on whether they'll text back, whether they seem interested, whether they'll validate your feeling. That's not love. That's not even infatuation in a healthy sense. That's your nervous system in survival mode, desperately seeking approval that you're worthy of being chosen. But here's the spiritual layer underneath all of this. Limerence is the soul's way of trying to heal through fantasy, but never received in reality. For Olivia, that was being seen. She grew up with two older brothers that were stars, athletes, honor students, the ones that everyone talked about at family dinners. She was the quiet one, the easy one, the one who didn't cause problems. So she didn't get much attention. She learned early on that love meant being in the background. That connection meant watching other people get chosen while you stay invisible. So when someone like Ethan came along, someone who asked deep questions, who seemed fascinated by her thoughts, who made her feel like the center of his world through all those texts and calls, her nervous system lit up. Finally, someone who sees me, someone who thinks I'm interesting, someone who wants to know everything about me. And her brain did what it's been doing since childhood, creating a fantasy where she wasn't invisible anymore, where someone was captivated by her, where she was finally the main character in someone else's story. That's what made Limerence so powerful. It wasn't about Ethan. It was about finally mattering to someone. So when Ethan showed up with the same pattern, poetic words, but no real follow through, her nervous system recognized it. Not consciously, but deep in her body, that primitive, survival oriented part of her brain. And it said, "This is it. This is love. If I can just get him to stay, if I can just make him choose me, I'd finally be enough." That's the wound speaking. That's the inner child trying to resolve something from the past. And Spirit doesn't show you this card to shame you. Spirit reveals this card so you can see where imagination has replaced intimacy. So if you're sitting there recognizing yourself in Olivia's story, just breathe for a second. This isn't about blame. It's not being broken or too much, or any of those stories you tell yourself. It's about awareness. It's about seeing the pattern clearly enough that you can finally choose something different. Because here's the truth. You're not addicted to the person. You're addicted to the longing. And underneath that longing is a question you've been asking your whole life. Am I worth staying for? The answer is yes. You always were. But you won't believe it until you stop outsourcing the answer to people who can't give it to you. Let's talk about the energy underneath Limerence, because this isn't just psychology, this is polarity, or rather, the distortion of it. In healthy attraction, the masculine and feminine energies create a natural pull. The masculine moves forward with direction and presence. The feminine opens and invites through radiance and receptiveness. There's tension, yes, but it's generative tension. It creates depth, curiosity, desire. In Limerence, that polarity gets twisted. The wounded feminine doesn't invite, she chases. The wounded masculine doesn't lead, he performs or chases. And both are running from the same thing, real intimacy. Let me break this down. Olivia was operating from a wounded feminine energy, not because she's a woman. This is about energy, not gender. She's pursuing, planning, trying to create the stability Ethan wasn't providing. She initiated conversations, suggested dates, interpreted his vague statements as promises. That's not invitation. That's control disguised as openness. And it happens when you don't trust that someone will choose you unless you make it easy for them. Ethan, on the other hand, was operating from wounded masculine energy. He was all potential, no follow through, all words, no action. He sent poetic texts but didn't make plans. He talked about deep connection but never showed up reliably. That's not leadership. That's fantasy disguised as romance. And it happens when you want the benefits of a connection without the vulnerability of actually being seen. This is anxious avoidant pairing, and it's one of the most common and most painful dynamics in modern dating. The anxious energy, which is Olivia, seeks consistency, reassurance, and closeness. The avoidant energy, which is Ethan, needs distance, independence, control. And they trigger each other perfectly. The more Olivia pursues, the more Ethan pulled back. The more Ethan pulled back, the more Olivia pursued. Both are terrified of the same thing, abandonment. They protect against it in opposite ways. Now, here's what's important to understand: neither of these patterns is the real you. They're survival strategies, they're armor. Olivia's pursuit wasn't about Ethan, it was about proving she was worth staying for. Ethan's avoidant wasn't about Olivia, it was about keeping himself safe from the vulnerability of actually being chosen and having to live up to it. So, what does this healthy polarity actually look like? The grounded masculine shows up every time with clear intention. He's not vague, he's not breadcrumbing, he's not maybe we'll hang out soon. Here's what it actually looks like. He doesn't text you for 3 weeks and then sends a, hey, what's up at midnight. He reaches out with actual intention. I'd love to take you to dinner Thursday. Are you free? He makes plans, real plans, not let's see what happens or I'll let you know. He picks a time, a place, he follows through. And if something comes up and he needs to reschedule, he doesn't ghost. He doesn't go silent. He communicates. Hey, work just blew up. Can we move this to Friday instead? He's present when he's with you, not on his phone, not distracted, not half there while his mind is somewhere else. When you're talking, he's actually listening. He asks follow-up questions. He remembers what you told him last week. He's not performing interest to get something from you. He's genuinely interested in you, in your thoughts, in who you are beyond what you look like or what you can offer him. And here's the key. He's not afraid of your emotions. When you're upset, when you're vulnerable, when you need to talk about something hard, he doesn't shut down. He doesn't get defensive. He stays. He listens. He holds space. Not to fix you, not to make it go away, just be there for you. That's leadership. That's the kind of strength that actually feels safe to the feminine. And he has standards too. He's not chasing someone who's inconsistent. He's not waiting around for someone who can't decide if they want him. If you're playing games, if you're testing him constantly, if you're making him prove himself over and over, he's not going to stick around trying to earn your approval. Not because he's cold, because he knows his worth too. He's looking for a woman who can meet him, not someone he has to chase or convince. That's grounded masculine energy. Clear, consistent, present, respectful of himself and of you. And that steadiness creates safety. It creates the container the feminine needs to actually relax and open. The grounded feminine invites. She radiates, open, receptive. But she's not chasing. She's not managing. She's not trying to convince someone to choose her. Here's what it actually looks like. She responds to texts. She's not the only one always initiating. She's not double texting. She's not checking if he saw her message and wondering why he hasn't responded yet. She shows interest, but she's not trying to carry the entire conversation. She's not doing all the emotional labor. She's not the one suggesting every date, making every plan. She shares herself, her thoughts, her feelings, her life, but she's not performing. She's not cultivating the perfect version of herself to keep him interested. She's just herself, fully, without apology. And when someone doesn't meet her energy, when they're inconsistent, vague, half present, she doesn't chase harder. She doesn't try to figure out what she did wrong. She just lets it go. Not dramatically, not to prove a point. She just releases what wasn't meant for her. Because she knows her worth. And that knowing isn't intellectual. It's embodied. It's in her bones. It's in the way she moves through the world. So she can allow herself to be seen, fully seen. She trusts that the right person will meet her there. Not someday, not when she's fixed or perfect or healed enough. Right now, as she is. She's not waiting anxiously for validation. She's not refreshing her phone. She's not obsessing over what he meant by that text. She's simply present in her own energy. She's living her life, enjoying her friends, pursuing her passions, feeling full in herself. And that present, that groundness is magnetic. Because it's rare. Because most people are either chasing or running. But she's just here, rooted, open, available to real connection, but not desperate for it. And that energy, that's what the grounded masculine recognizes and respects. That's what makes him want to rise, to show up, to meet her in that calm, clear space. When these two energies meet, grounded masculine, grounded feminine, there's attraction, yes. But it's not chaotic. It's not desperate. It's calm, clear. It's two people who are actually available to each other. Not performing, not chasing, just present. And that's the difference between limerence and love. Limerence is two nervous systems in panic mode, trying to get something from each other. Love is two nervous systems in calm, offering something to each other. That's what changes everything. The power of being calm enough to actually give and receive. All right, let's make this practical. Because understanding limerence intellectually is one thing, actually breaking the cycle, that's another. First practice, the screenshot test. You know that long emotional text you're about to send? The one where you're pouring your heart out, or asking where things are going, or explaining how you feel? Before you hit send, screenshot it. Send it to a friend, a real friend who will be honest with you. And if they say, don't send that, don't send it. I know it feels urgent. I know you think you need to send it right away or the moment will pass. But here's the truth. If it's coming from anxiety, from that desperate need for reassurance, it's not going to land the way you want it to. And your friend can see that more clearly than you can in the moment. So screenshot first, get that reality check, then decide. Second practice, the reality list. Get out a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On the left side, write everything you know about this person based on their actions. Not their words, their actions. How often do they follow through? Do they show up reliably? Do they make time for you? Or do you feel like you're always fitting into the gaps of their life? On the right side, write down the story you've been telling yourself about them. The version of them you've created in your mind. But now look at both lists. How much overlap is there? Chances are the fantasy version is way more present, way more consistent, way more emotional available than the real person has ever actually been. And that gap, that's where limerence lives. Third practice, the 24-hour rule. Before you confess your feelings, before you have the what are we conversation, before you send that vulnerable message, wait 24 hours. One day, not 3 days, that's too long. You're just overthinking it. But 24 hours gives you enough space to check in with yourself. After 24 hours, ask yourself, am I saying this because it's true or because I'm trying to get a specific response? If it's true, if you genuinely need to express something that's real for you, go ahead. But if you're trying to manipulate an outcome, if you're fishing for reassurance, if you're hoping they'll say the same thing that makes you feel secure, don't send it. Because that's not communication. That's anxiety looking for relief. Fourth practice, the in-person versus text ratio. This one's simple but revealing. Track how many hours you've spent texting this person versus how many hours you've actually spent time together in person. If you've been texting for 6 weeks but you've only had 2 one-hour coffee dates, you actually don't know this person. You know the text version of them. And your brain has filled in all the rest with fantasy. Real connection is built in person, in the same space, in how someone makes you feel when you're breathing the same air. Text can supplement that, but it can't replace it. So if your text hours vastly outweigh your in-person time, you're building a fantasy relationship. Fifth practice, the Google or Outlook calendar check. This one's going to sting, but it's important. If someone hasn't put you on their actual calendar with concrete plans, a real date, a real time, a real commitment, you're not a priority. You're an option. And I don't mean that cruelly. I mean that practically. People make time for what matters to them. If someone's interested, they make plans, real plans. Not let's hang out soon, not I'll let you know when I'm free. But Thursday at 7, this restaurant, I'll pick you up or meet you at the front of the restaurant. If you're not on their calendar, you're in the maybe pile, and you deserve better than maybe. So pay attention to that, not to what they say, to what they actually do, because actions are the only truth that matters. And here's something I've learned to do myself because I've fallen into limerence too many times to count. When I match with someone on an app, I'll ask a few basic questions, see how they respond. If they give me more than one word answers, if there's actual substance there, I move quickly. I ask for their availability. I suggest a real date, a real time. Not because I'm rushing, but because I've learned the hard way that the longer you stay in text land, the more your brain starts building fantasy. You start having deep conversation, sharing vulnerable things, creating emotional intimacy before you even sat across a table from each other. And by the time you meet, you have already built someone up in your head who may not match the person in front of you. So now I keep it simple. A few messages to establish basic interest and compatibility. Then I move on to meeting in person. Because that's where real attraction lives. That's where you find out if the chemistry translates. And that's how you avoid spending weeks or months building a fantasy relationship with someone you barely know. So before we move on, check in with yourself. Which of these practices hit a nerve? That's the one you need to start with. Let's be real honest for a minute. If you keep falling into limerence, it's not because you had bad taste in people. It's not because you're too emotional or too needy. It's because somewhere deep down, you don't believe you're worthy of real love. So you settle for the fantasy because the fantasy can't reject you. The fantasy can't abandon you. The fantasy can't see your flaws and decide you're not enough. But the fantasy also can't hold you, can't show up for you, can't build a real life with you. And that's the trade-off you've been making. Safety from real rejection in exchange for never actually having real love. And I get it. I've done it too. I've held on to almost and maybes because it felt safer than putting myself out there with someone who actually was available. Because available people are risky. They can see you, all of you, and they can choose to leave. But unavailable people, they're safe because you can always tell yourself it would have worked if they'd just been ready. But here's the truth. You're not protecting yourself. You're abandoning yourself. Every time you chase someone who's not fully showing up, you're sending yourself the message that you're not worthy of showing up for. If you accept breadcrumbs, you're teaching your nervous system that scraps are all you deserve. And your body believes you. So here's the truth. The thing that most people don't want to hear. If you want real love, you have to be willing to let go of the fantasy. You have to be willing to feel the grief, that disappointment, that fear that maybe there's no one out there who will actually choose you. On the other side of that grief is freedom. Freedom from the loop. Freedom from the obsessive thinking. Freedom from the anxiety that's been running your life. And in that freedom, you finally have space for something real. Here's the truth about limerence that nobody wants to hear. You're not actually afraid of being hurt. You're afraid of being seen. Because when you fall for fantasy, when you build someone up in your head based on texts and late night calls, you get to stay in control. You get to write the story. You never have to risk being fully known. Real relationships, they require you to show up as you actually are. Not the cultivated version, not the best self you perform over text. Just you, messy, imperfect, human. And if you've been cycling through limerence, ask yourself, am I chasing people who aren't available because I'm not actually available either? Am I choosing fantasy because reality means I have to be vulnerable? But here's what happens when you let go of limerence. You stop being attracted to potential and start being attracted to presence. You start falling for conversations and start falling for consistency. And yeah, it may feel less exciting at first, But that's because you're running on anxiety for so long that calm feels foreign. Give yourself time to adjust because the person who's actually right for you, they won't trigger your limerence. They just show up and keep showing up. And you'll realize you don't have to imagine who they are. You already know because they've been real with you from the start. That's courage. That's growth. That's what turns fantasy into reality. Pay attention to that. The cost of staying safe versus the reward of being real. Here's what I want you to try this week. First, journal on these questions. What does limerence give me that a real relationship doesn't? What am I afraid of would happen if someone was actually available and consistent with me? What story would I have to let go about myself if I admitted I'm worthy of stable love? Write without censoring yourself. Let whatever comes up, come up. Second, notice your pacing. Real relationships unfold slowly. There's time. There's space. There's getting to know each other without urgency. Limerence moves fast. At least it feels fast. Everything's intense, high stakes, urgent. So if you're feeling that frantic energy, that I need to know where this is going right now feeling, that's your cue to slow down. Take a step back, breathe, and ground yourself. Ask, what's the rush? What am I afraid of if I slow down? Third, date someone calm. I know, it sounds boring, but try it anyways. Go on a date with someone who's consistent, who follows through, who doesn't keep you guessing, and notice what happens in your body. Does it feel flat? Does it feel like no spark? Or does it just feel unfamiliar? Because if calm feels wrong, that's not about them. That's about your conditioning. The only way to rewire that condition is give yourself the experience of being attracted to peace, even if it feels weird at first. Fourth, get support. If you keep cycling through limerence, if you can't seem to break the pattern on your own, get help. Therapy, coaching, a tarot reading, not for predictions, but to help you see what's underneath the pattern, to reveal what your heart's been trying to resolve. This isn't something you need to figure out alone. There's no shame in needing support to heal old wounds that are showing up in your love life. So before we close, ask yourself, what would change if I stopped chasing the feeling and start trusting the reality? Here's what happened with Olivia after she let go of the fantasy. She met someone, he's kind, he's consistent. He asked her out in advance and actually showed up. And you know what's wild? She almost walked away because it didn't feel dramatic enough. But she made herself stay. She made herself sit with the discomfort of calm. And now, she doesn't want to go back. She didn't know love could feel this steady. That's it. That's the shift. Limerence isn't love. It's longing. It's the heart trying to resolve something it never received. And the moment you stop chasing the fantasy, you create space for something real. Not perfect, not fairy tale, but real. Someone who shows up, someone who stays, someone whose presence calms your nervous system instead of activating it. And if that sounds boring, that's okay. That's just your body adjusting. Because real attraction doesn't require anxiety to prove it's real. It requires two people who are actually available. And if you're still dating through apps, remember what I said earlier. Keep the texting short. Ask a few questions, see if there's substance, and then move to meet in person. Don't spend weeks building emotional intimacy through a screen, because by the time you meet, you've already fallen for a fantasy. Meet them. See how they make you feel in the same room. Let reality guide you, not imagination. That's how you avoid limerence from the start. So wherever you're listening from, maybe in the middle of limerence right now, maybe healing from it, maybe recognizing a pattern you've been running for years, just breathe. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest with yourself of what's real. And becoming means letting go of who you thought you had to be to earn love. And stepping into the truth that you were always worthy of it. And here's your spirit whisper for this week. Desire reveals what's healing, and awareness turns that desire into wisdom. Let that follow you into your next text, your next date, your next moment of longing. Because the spirit of dating isn't about finding the perfect person, it's about learning to recognize real love when it shows up and having the courage to choose it, even when fantasy feels safer. If today's conversation about limerence sparks something in you, I'd love to hear about it. You can share your own story, question, or reflection, and some submissions may even become part of a future episode. You can leave me a private voicemail right on the website. Just tap the mic icon at the spiritofdating.com website. Your story might help someone else find their own clarity too. Every story has a mirror, every mirror a map. And if this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. It helps more people find their way to real, grounded love. This is the spirit of dating, real stories, real spirit, real dating. I'm George Duss. You can find me at Duss Tarot for personal readings or connect with me on social media. Until next time, trust what's real over what's possible. Your heart knows the difference.